Greetings, fellow gamers. I'm the Soulsborne Seeker, and today I'll be reviewing Inaya, Life After Gods, an action platformer Metroidvania game developed by ExoGenesis Studios and released on the 27th of March 2025 for PC, with PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch releases expected later in the year. The game transpires in a world where technology and tribal culture intertwine, and tells the story of the titular Inaya, a woman whose past was marked by tragedy when her small band of fugitives led by her father, were attacked by a group of oppressive warriors called the Ironskins when she was just a little girl. The resulting clash saw her people slaughtered and herself plummet down a crag in the embrace of her mortally wounded parent, whose body kept her from meeting an untimely fate, making her the sole survivor of the onslaught. To her fortune, she was discovered by a kind-hearted wanderer named Khonsu, who took her under his wing and taught her how to fight and survive. Several years after that fateful day, Inaya has evolved into a strong warrior and is finally ready to find out the truth about her past and the reason for her band's demise. Thus, she goes on a perilous quest across a land where everything wants her dead, hoping to finally make sense of her traumatic experience. Inaya Life After Gods has a very strong narrative foundation and is quite story-driven, with its multitude of scattered nodes and interesting fully voiced characters doing an effective job of fleshing out its fantastically rendered world, featuring some of the most amazing world building I have seen in the genre in terms of history and lore that makes this feel like a lived-in land drenched in misfortune. That being said, as much as I enjoyed the game's story, I do have to say that there was one element of it that I felt was a bit tiresome, and that was Inaya herself. As beautiful and powerful as she was, I have to admit that her personality was very off-putting, with her mood often switching between anger, sarcasm, and kindness in ways that came off as abrupt, to the point where I sometimes had trouble understanding whether she was being passive-aggressive, sarcastic, or honest during her conversations. For a character that grew up under the guidance of a clearly calm and collected mentor, I would have expected more of a balanced approach in terms of her behavior, which ended up feeling somewhat erratic instead. I should mention that the game has dialogue options for you to choose from, which do influence her disposition, but the aforementioned issue still presented itself regardless of my approach to her alignment. Now, when it comes to the title's world, Inaya Life After Gods is easily one of the most impressive offerings I have seen in terms of the presentation of its biomes, courtesy of its ridiculously stunning and detailed art style, with its fantastically vibrant graphics and smooth animations being a feast for the eyes and often making you wonder if you're playing a game or watching a sublime cartoon instead. Each biome's background and foreground are intricately designed and adorned with various details meant to further enforce each area's history, culture, civilization, or lack thereof, with colors practically jumping out of the screen. However, this is one of those situations where you can simply have too much of a good thing. You see, several of the game's backgrounds are so detailed and packed with visual information that they produce a sort of sensory overload, which leads to a feeling of clutter and lack of visual clarity, which in turn lead to a sense of overwhelm as well as questioning which parts of the biome are on the background and which on the foreground. This issue was particularly accentuated in the first biome, and more specifically in its vertical rooms that felt almost identical to one another. As a matter of fact, background repetition was frequent across the game's areas, which often led to a feeling of sameness as you traveled across corridors and clambered up obstacles while getting a sense that you had been here before. That's not to say that there aren't some amazingly crafted, unique places you'll get to visit, but I still couldn't help wishing for a bit more visual variety in several of the biomes I got to explore, as well as spreading out of details to some of the less detailed areas in order to balance things out. Speaking of exploration, Inaya's world hides a good number of collectibles for you to uncover, most of which were not only magnificently helpful, but nearly mandatory to obtain if you want to save yourself a world of pain on your journey. Essentially, the game's discoverables are divided into 6 categories, namely implants, injector flowers, notes, clues, quest items, and finally, gold nodes. Implants are items that offer some incredibly helpful benefits once acquired and equipped, such as increased health pool and damage output, as well as traversal abilities like the dash and double jump. I cannot overstate how much I loved the variety presented by the mixing and matching of these accessories, which truly allow you to tailor combat and traversal to your style, and which I highly recommend you keep a watchful eye out for, since they will make the difference between life and death, as well as platforming efficiency, as we'll see later on. You can have a total of 6 different implants equipped at the same time, though you only start with 1 slot available and the rest need to be unlocked via the completion of certain quests. Injector flowers are special blossoms you discover and obtain, with each one yielding a permanent health point increase upon pickup on top of granting you various benefits that are related to your health injections, which are the game's healing mechanic. Only one injector flower can be equipped at any given moment, so choose wisely according to your gameplay needs. Notes offer small snippets of lore that flesh out the game's world in interesting and, at times, cryptic ways. Clues are observations that Inaya can make when interacting with special points of interest, which are always related to the game's bosses and passively increase your damage output toward the boss for which the observation was made, thus making you feel like a true hunter stalking his prey. Quest items, as the name suggests, are special objects you need to find and return to the respective quest givers in exchange for some incredibly useful rewards, including extra implant slots and new implants. Finally, gold nodes, of which you will find aplenty, are gold formations of various sizes whose destruction yields gold, the game's currency, which is necessary to upgrade Inaya, as I'll explain in the combat section. Staying a bit on exploration, while the aforementioned collectibles were incredible to obtain, unfortunately there were quite a few things here that left a sour taste in my mouth, bringing the whole experience down a notch. For starters, the map overview feels odd. Essentially, the map has two separate views between which you can switch at will, one being the general overview, which shows you the whole world, and the other being a zoomed-in view that focuses on the room Inaya finds herself in at any given moment, which is also the view that offers useful details such as implants, gold nodes, save points, fast travel locations, quest points, and injection flowers, all of which are automatically marked on the map, which is awesome. Now, the general overview map feels very much disjointed in a way, since each area is not only portrayed in rectangular fashion, which doesn't really match the room's actual shape, but also paired to the rest of the rectangles via connective points that also don't exactly match the exit locations of the detailed view, making the whole thing feel crude and disorderly when paired with how massive the world can seem once you have explored a good chunk of it. I also didn't appreciate how you could only zoom into the room Inaya was located and not allowed to do the same to the rest of the rooms, which made exploration needlessly tedious since you had to revisit each area personally in order to see if you were missing any collectibles there. It didn't help that the game's manual marking system in the form of these colored symbols didn't really work either, with said symbols turning invisible most of the time when placed, which I realized since my cursor performed the interaction animation when I would scroll over the spot I had placed them on. On top of all that, the aforementioned visual clutter and frequent occurrence of backgrounds in combination with repetition of room structural design made it very difficult to map out the areas in my head since they all kind of looked the same in each biome, forcing me to frequently stop and check my map overview in order to make sure I was going in the right direction due to a significant lack of distinguishing map design elements. Now, I wish I could say that this is where the issues regarding the map and exploration stop, but these are just part of Inaya's true overarching problem, which is its really bad pacing, and said problem is mainly the result of two separate gameplay fundamentals that we need to break down, namely platforming and questing. One thing you need to know about this game is that it is quite non-linear in its exploration of the world, which, under normal circumstances, I would have adored, but here things didn't work that well, and in order to fully understand this problem, we first need to talk about platforming. Inaya, Life After Gods, is quite platforming heavy when it comes to its exploration. In essence, over the course of your first couple of hours, you will come in possession of three different weapons: the twin blades, the flail, and the fists, with all three of them offering their own set of offensive, defensive, and traversal capabilities, and between which you can switch at will, with the twin blades allowing for an upward lunge to gain height, the flail being capable of grabbing onto specialized points, and the fist creating a cool ignition burst that offers a small boost in the direction of your choice. Now, while the game's acrobatic challenges start relatively normal, they progressively become more complex as they start necessitating switching between the three weapons during a single platforming segment for you to make it to the other side, and that's where things get tricky. There are two different ways in which said weapon exchange can happen, those being either an instant switch via the push of a button like the controller triggers, which is what I chose to use, or by opening up a radial menu that slows down time for you to choose your weapon and then make your move. I'll just go ahead and say that the radial option didn't work for me since it felt like it stunted momentum even more for a game that already has pacing issues, and did feel a bit disorienting as well, but do give it a shot in case it works for you. As for my choice, which was the instant switch, it felt much more fluid, but the problem is that given how instantaneous the change needs to be in order to have a seamless transition across obstacles, it often felt confusing as I accidentally pressed the wrong button in my rush to make it and switched to the wrong weapon, which ended up in me plummeting to my doom. I did get quite used to it eventually and had more hits than misses, but it still came off as much less than efficient efficient. Now, the reason why I reference platforming as a pacing issue is the following. The traversal abilities of all three weapons combined can actually allow you to reach certain areas earlier than expected if you play your cards right, which gives off a nice sense of sequence breaking. The downside to this is that, given a considerable lack of direction early on, you will probably end up getting to places prematurely, and since the enemy difficulty of the world is fixed, you'll most likely come across an impossibly tough boss battle after struggling tooth and nail to get there, only to be decimated and feel as if you just lost your time. I should mention that once you get a couple of solid implants that allow you to double jump and do a very high upward strike, platforming is largely trivialized, but for me that happened around the 6-hour mark, so how early you'll make things easier for yourself will largely depend on the order in which you will explore the world, as well as how good you are in combat. Now, for the second major piece of the pacing issue, as mentioned previously, the game is very narrative driven and relies on your completion of quests in order for you to progress through the story. While that's all well and good in theory, given how interesting the game's lore and characters are, in practice it results in lots of dialogue, which I don't really mind, but also numerous instances of repeated backtracking to find items, kill enemies, and talk to NPCs, which, in combination with the map design issues that can make moving across areas a chore, can become quite tedious, though it does get easier and faster the stronger and more versatile you become. Just to give you an idea, it wasn't until the 6-hour mark that I finally started enjoying the game consistently, with my time up until that point having felt like wading through a thick swamp to get to some incredibly cool section, only to repeat that again and again. Since we're on the topic of issues, I do wish to point out a few of the technical variety, which do need to be addressed. First, the main menu screen had a delay of about 15 seconds before loading up and showing the options to me, and quitting the game took about 25 seconds before I was able to see my desktop again. Second, I did come across this error once after I saved my game, so I figured I'd place it here for reference. Finally, and most importantly, the game is plagued by a significant lack of sound effects. More specifically, every single fast travel point is missing any sort of sound when utilized, and almost every humanoid enemy is nearly silent, featuring limited to no sounds when it comes to walking, attacking, being hit or dying, which made fighting them feel like it was happening on mute, thus frequently breaking immersion. Thankfully this wasn't an issue for bosses, but it still needs to be addressed as soon as possible. I will point out that the developers are aware of these problems and have promised to rectify them with the next patch, so hopefully they will be fixed promptly. On to some more positive remarks. I'm glad to say that the game's combat was awesome. As already stated, early on in the adventure, Inaya will become the proud owner of 3 separate weapons, specifically the twin blades, the flail, and the fists, each one boasting its own offensive and defensive skills. The twin blades hack and slash at your enemies in hectic fashion and can also be occasionally thrown at them. The flail is incredibly slow but delivers powerful hits while also being able to magnetize projectiles, and the fists become progressively faster as you deliver a hail of punches at your enemies and can also be utilized to clad you in a defensive shield for a few seconds. Each weapon has a massive skill tree of its own, which is divided into 6 sub-trees from which you can purchase passive abilities that are either oriented to that specific weapon, such as having your twin blades do damage over time, but can also be universal, with each weapon tree featuring purchasable nodes for overall health, defense, damage, and critical chance upgrades that apply to all armaments. I'll admit I found the number of skill trees a bit daunting at first, but quickly came to love them given the amount of power they offered if you chose the right upgrades. I should also mention that there is a console near the start of the game which you can use to respec your skills if you want to try something new, though I never used it. Just as a word of advice, I'd recommend steering clear of the flail, at least as a starting weapon, since you'll probably get bored of it quite fast due to its sluggish pace. I personally went for the twin blades, which were the fastest and ended up doing massive damage while allowing full mobility, with the occasional use of the fists when certain enemies left openings, since using said weapon requires of you to stand still, which wasn't a wise strategy most of the time. Boss-wise, this is beyond the shadow of a doubt where the game truly and utterly shines. I cannot begin to describe how much I loved each and every one of the big bads I got to fight here, whom are arguably the main course and focal point of this experience. Every villain present, both story-related and optional, is fully distinct both in terms of visual design as well as attack patterns, which you better pay attention to because these battles will take every ounce of your skill to be overcome, especially early on. More specifically, following the first 2 bosses, whom were tough but very much manageable, the game started throwing one powerhouse after another at me, which was when I realized the importance of upgrading my character in order to stand a chance against them. I will say that eventually several of the big bads become quite easy to defeat if you revisit some of them during late game due to to the fixed difficulty of the world and its foes, though for the most part, the majority maintained a decent challenge. I will also say that a couple of them couldn't do anything if I pogoed off them, which was how I managed to beat a really tough boss around the mid-game, so do keep that in mind. In terms of difficulty, after having played the whole game on normal, I'd situate Inaya Life After Gods on the very challenging side of things in its initial hours, with said difficulty curbing reasonably as you move into late game, given that you take the time to improve your character accordingly. I should mention that the game features a total of 4 different difficulty levels, including one that allows you to tailor the challenge to your own tastes, and you can switch between difficulty levels at any given moment, so there's nothing to worry about if you want a more casual experience. As for length, it took me 12 hours to complete Inaya Life After Gods with what I estimate to be 90% completion rate while missing a few treasures, a handful of gold nodes and one unfinished quest which I'm not sure how to complete, with what I assume to be an additional couple of hours for 100%. For a price of about $26, if the issues I mentioned don't discourage you, I'd cautiously recommend checking out Inaya Life After Gods, though I do believe it would be best to get it during a sale. In conclusion, my time with Inaya Life After Gods was a mixed bag, though leaning toward the positive. On the upside, I absolutely adored its narrative, lore, world building and art direction. I had a blast with combat, I loved character progression, I appreciated the exploratory side of things, I had fun with platforming for the most part, and I couldn't get enough of the bosses. On the downside, the game's overly detailed biomes can lead to a sense of visual clutter and difficulty to differentiate between background from foreground at times. Certain platforming instances can get frustrating due to the need to use all 3 weapons on the fly. Pacing is largely problematic as a result of lots of quest-related backtracking and the non-linear approach to exploration which may lead to dead ends. The map overview design feels disjointed and inefficient, room structure gives off a sense of repetition, and finally, we have the aforementioned technical issues as well. Inaya Life After Gods is an odd combination of fun, brilliance, frustration, and tedium, making it a cautionary recommendation but also a far cry from the wonderful experience that had been promised by its demo. There's entertainment to be had here if you persevere and get past the game's midpoint, but whether you have the patience to do that is up to you. My final verdict on Inaya Life After Gods is 6.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts on Inaya Life After Gods? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!